I received a number of reports earlier today from test takers who got their scores back and were shocked and surprised to find that they dropped 10 to 20 points or more from their practice tests, even though they feel like the test itself went fine a couple weeks back. Today, I'll walk you through my thoughts on how likely it is that LSAC messed up August LSAT scores, and if so, what you should do. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Schwartz. I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005, and I personally increased my LSAT score from a 152 to a 175. Now, the truth is that after every single LSAT score release, there are people posting on forums saying, my score was great, I'm so excited. There are others posting, my score was terrible, I don't know what happened. There is a selection bias in those who post on forums. They're at the extremes, either amazing and shocked in a good way, or terrible and shocked in the worst way. In particular, this year, there have also been some conspiracy theories going around that LSAC made the August LSAT harder to balance out the fact that there's no more logic games, which was somehow an easier format, which if you think about it for 2 seconds, doesn't really make sense because it is not obvious that a version of the test with logic games is easier or harder than one without. It depends on the individual. Some people loved logic games and did great on them. Others hated logic games and it was their worst section. So it is unclear, it is ambiguous how the removal of logic games would affect test takers in the aggregate. According to LSAC's own data, even though on an individual level, some people did better on one version of the test versus another, those differences essentially canceled out in aggregate when taken as a whole across the entire LSAT test-taking population, meaning that a version of the test without logic games is not necessarily harder than one with the logic games. Now, there has been a lot of LSAT score inflation over the past few years due to a combination of factors. The temporary LSAT Flex format introduced at the beginning of the pandemic that was only 3 sections down from the previous 5 sections prior to the pandemic. There's also been a big increase in the number of people to whom LSAC has been granting accommodations, resulting in rising LSAT medians and accompanying percentile changes. The LSAT's also gone from being offered only 4 times a year to being offered 8 times a year, making it easier to retake the LSAT and get a higher score on record. Now, taken all together, this has led to a significant increase in LSAT score medians across the board, and in particular, this is most notable at the top 14 law schools, all of which now have LSAT score medians of 170 or above. Yale Law School has an LSAT median as high as 175. With regard to percentile changes, it used to be that scoring a 173 put you in the 99th percentile. Now you've got to get a 175 to be in the 99th percentile. How does all of this relate to August LSAT scores in particular? It could mean that for students who dropped 10, 20 points or more from their practice test scores, even though they feel like the LSAT went fine back on test day, it may not be that LSAC screwed up the scoring or they messed up the curve. It could be a deliberate attempt on the part of LSAC to make the curve harder to account for the recent LSAT score inflation. If this is the case, it definitely does not seem quite fair to me that they would make such a radical change over such a short period. If anything, they should do it more gradually, but bottom line, it is what it is. We did get similar reports after both the April LSAT and the June LSAT earlier this year, so this could be a continuation of that trend. If you are retaking the LSAT, which I recommend that everyone do, for the simple reason that law schools do not average multiple scores, but rather they only take the highest, you have a couple more opportunities to take the LSAT this calendar year alone. You could take it in September, October, or November and apply early enough this cycle. If you are retaking, focus on drilling hard questions to make sure that you'll be ready for whatever LSAC might throw your way. At LSAT Unplugged, we'll create a personalized day-by-day study plan for you to drill the areas that need the most work, because if you want to get a different result next time, you've got to prep differently. If there's a resource you were considering but didn't pursue it, now's the time. And the best way to prep, especially if you're on a short timeline for September or October, is going to be private one-on-one LSAT coaching, personalized to exactly what you need on your schedule. Links below to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. Now, by the way, for one last final resort, if you really feel like LSAC must have made a mistake on your score, there is an LSAT score audit option. It costs $150 for LSAC to double check your score. Whether it turns out that your score is higher or lower than whatever they initially released, that new score is going to be the one that stands, and you can't audit your scores a second time. It is highly unlikely that this would result in a change to your score if you did the audit option, because this is a computerized test. The score audit option to me seems like an artifact back from when the LSAT was on paper, and it's possible that there was a technical error of some kind with regard to the Scantron or with regard to misbubbling in some way. It's not like you would have misbubbled on a computerized LSAT, but they do leave this option available as a last resort. If you truly feel like things could not have possibly turned out the way they did, you might want to check that out. Now that the LSAT is computerized, it seems to me like it's still a bit of a money grab to even let this remain as an option. But for the rare cases where you think it might be appropriate, you might want to check that out by contacting LSAC to find out more. Anyway, folks, that's all for now. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.